Hi, this is Kylie Coo. Welcome to my studio. So, we are into July and that means a new prompt for the Mixed Media Emporium Facebook group. And Nina and I have decided that the prompt for this month is Nautical. And we're going to do things slightly differently again this month. And this time what we're going to do is to give you a weekly theme. And within that theme you can create whatever you want. Artist trading cards, you could do small projects, you could do art journal pages, whatever you want. And what I've decided to do is one project that I will work on throughout this month, every week, and incorporate the theme from every week into this. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to make an artist's book. So I'm going to use this paper from Arteza. It's 180 GSM, £110. And what I'm going to do is take some of the pages out of here and I'm going to make an artist's book. I'll say a bit more about what I mean by that in just a minute. But meantime, I'm going to take some pieces of paper. I've cut my pages up, well in fact I've torn them up, and they're going to be roughly 8 3/8 of an inch by 5 7/8 of an inch. Now this will turn out to be A6 size if you're using the A system of paper. I'm just showing you that quickly in centimetres there. So I have 5 pieces that size and we're going to make them into a little book just by using glue. So no sewing involved. And all I'm going to do now is to fold each of the pieces in half, and I'll just use a bone folder to get a nice crease in them. Now I'm calling this an artist's book rather than a journal because this is a project from start to finish, so I'm very deliberately using this as a book. And you could use an altered book to do this. You could do it in a normal art journal if you'd prefer to, or you could, make ATCs based on the painting that I'm going to be creating in my book today. But artist book rather than journal, because this is not something that I'm going to come back and journal in. It's going to be a start to finish project, albeit over the 4 weeks of this particular prompt. So I'm folding all of these, and what I will do later is to put this on at speed. I need to put it on at some speed today because I had 2 hours worth of footage and I've had to cut some of it out because once I get to the painting part it's quite involved, but I think it's a lot of fun. Just showing you here, this paper has a textured side and a smooth side. The way I'm putting this one together, I've got the smooth side pages to work on, but I'd already put another one together where I had the texture pages. But the important thing just now is about the way that I'm going to put this booklet together. So just making sure that I've got all these nicely creased, and this really is an easy way to make it. Now I'm taking that last page there and I'm simply tearing that in half. And all I'd done with these is I really just tore all the pages. I just took my big sheet of A3 paper, halved them again, and it's the easiest way to get this. So here we go. I've got all my pieces, just making sure that I've got my folded edges together. I'm putting the 2 half pieces off to the side. And all I'm going to use is some PVA glue. Now the reason I'm creating the book this way is I want the book to be able to stand up at the end of this project so that it can stand up on its own, without having to be propped against anything. Because I have it in my mind that by the time it's finished, I want to have it that the pages are slightly opened on it. But, that will become clearer, hopefully, as the week goes on. So I'm just taking this basic PVA and I'm going to put some on this part of the page and some on the one that I'm going to glue to it. So I'll just keep this piece at normal speed just now and then I will speed it up a bit. So making sure that I get right to the edges And I've not put this on too thick, so there's very little glue comes out when I put it together, but you know, I do want a nice coating, and that will go slightly tacky while I put the PVA glue onto the piece that I'm then going to stick to it. So again, making sure that I get that evenly spread right to the edges. And I always find that it's better to put glue on both sides, and then the final piece seems to stick together better. So just going to line those up now, and because it's PVA, I've got a little bit of time and a little bit of manoeuvrability with it. So just pushing those together, and then what I'll do is I'll take my bone folder and just run over it. Then I'll open it up and just go over the page, or the 2 pages each side where I've actually stuck it together. Now you could do this with double-sided tape if you wanted. You could try it with glue stick if you had a nice strong glue stick. So there you go. You can see we've now got 2 pages because that's joined together. A little bit where it's perhaps not joining perfectly, mainly because I've torn the paper rather than cut it, but that's okay. That will be hidden by what we're going to do this week and in future weeks. So just taking the next page, you know, so gluing one, gluing the other, and then once more I will lay this one on top of the other. Again, just lining them up, and this is such an easy way to make a little book. And if you don't have thick paper, or if, as you know, I want this to be able to stand up, it's a good way for just kind of making the pages thicker. Now if you were using something like printer paper, you might just want to do double sheets of paper, so glue 2 together to begin with completely, and then do them in this way. Or, you know, you could glue them to something else. So getting that page on now. Always just going over it with the bone folder, just making sure that they're pressed tightly together. And now my single pieces, I'm going to put one on the front and one on the back. Now, could have taken one piece and put it all the way around and round the spine. It would have just needed something just slightly bigger. So I figured at this point this is the easiest way to do this, and I may come back in future weeks and put something over the spine, because I won't do the cover until the very end of the project. So that one goes on the front. At this point it doesn't matter whether that's the front or the back. And then the other one goes on the other side. And you know, this could be used for so many different types of things. It could be used to make little journals that you could then go on and decorate or write in or whatever. So again, just putting that together. And just finally taking the bone folder, little bit of excess glue that time, just wiped that off with my finger, and there we have it. And as I say, that is now strong enough to stand up on its own, which is exactly what I want. Now what I could do now is to place this under a heavy book for a little while, or you could take some bulldog clips and clip it together along the spine. A book would ensure that the pages were fully stuck down, but that ensures that the spines together. And there's the other one that I just made just before that one. I just wanted one that had already glued. So the theme for this week is on the rocks. And I'm just going to protect my pages there, and I've got a piece of paper that I'm going to use in my palette, and I'm taking first of all this ultramarine blue. Now if you're going to do this project, use whatever paints you have. I'm now using titanium white. You could use an ordinary blue, ordinary white. Just make whatever you've got fit this. You don't need to use the same colour. Now I'm going to create a wash. You could do the wash just with water, but I'm just going to use this matte medium, and I'm just going to mix a little bit of the white and the blue into the matte medium. All I want to do here is to create, I'm looking just really for a pale blue, but what's more important at this stage is just getting some colour down. And the reason I'm doing this is I just want to make sure that I take away all the white on the page, so that whatever I do on top, there's always going to be some colour underneath. And once that's done, I'm going to dry it fully. Now I did end up doing this page in a different way than I originally intended. I was going to work on this over 2 days because it was going to need drying time. But just the way things have worked out this week, I've had to kind of do the project or this page a little bit differently than intended. But never mind, I'm pleased with the way that it works out in the end. So all I'm doing now is I'm actually just going to draw something in. So I've put something in the sky, which is a moon. And now what I'm sketching is a mermaid, because I'm going to have a mermaid sitting on the rocks looking at the moon. So just going to sketch her out, putting her tail in, just trying to think how she would be sitting on the rocks. So I've kind of got her leaning back on one arm, and her other arm will be forward and resting on her tail. Now, just very sketchy at this point, just so that I know roughly where things are going to be. So sketching in the rocks. And then I do sketch a couple of other things in the background, but I end up not painting them in. So I'm now taking Mars Black. You see I'd sketched in a lighthouse and a starfish, but in the end they're not in it. So I'm taking my Mars Black and also the ultramarine blue that's still on my palette there, doing a little bit of a mix together, and what I'm going to do is to start to block in the sky. Now just blocking it in at this point, and this gives me a nice kind of indigo colour, but you'll see that I do add in more black, more blue, because this is going to be a nighttime sky, and this piece is going to have lots and lots of layers of paint. I want to create something that's got lots of colour. So I'm now taking the phthalo blue and also the phthalo green. And I'm going to start to block in the sea. Just very much blocking in at this time. The detail will all come later. As I say, what I want to do is to try and create a piece that's got lots of colour, but you're not quite sure where that colour comes from. So there'll be lots of different things added that at the end of the day will give, I think, a very nice effect, and I hope it's something you like, and I hope it's something you'll try, because for me this is a fun way to paint. So I've got my sea blocked in now, and now I'm going to start to block in the rocks. So I'm taking burnt umber, and these are all paints by Arteza, and I'm going to take the bits of black that's there as well and just start to put them down, and you'll see that I'm just kind of pushing it down as well as brushing it on, because what I also want to do is to create a piece of texture. My original intention for this piece was to have it something that was very textured, but as I say, I would have had to have done that over 2 days, and just the way things have worked out, that wasn't possible. But I'm trying just to create the texture that I wanted by the paint. So now taking Scarlet Red, get some of that on my palette. And I'm going to take an old card in a minute. I'm mixing that in a little bit with some of the ultramarine blue that was still on there. And yeah, I'm getting a little bit more of the ultramarine blue out. It's a kind of purple that I'm making here just by mixing the red and the blue. And I'm just going to dab that on. Then I'm going to take the old plastic card and I'm just scraping that out. And it won't matter if I go over the moon or the mermaid at this stage, because that will all be dealt with later. You see I picked up some of the red on that. I'm adding some blue now. Just adding it on and then scraping it. Just trying to get the notion of the colours playing in the sky. You know, perhaps there was a glorious sunset just before it turned dark, and there's just the little remnants of those colours in the sky. Again, just taking a bit more of the Scarlet Red. And there I go, just adding that in. Just those colours playing in the sky. And for me, that just creates interest. It means that the colours aren't so flat. And I guess it's artistic license in terms of how the sky might look. Scraping it both ways, just moving that colour around. And I love playing with a plastic card like this, adding some of that to the sea as well. And I think I even go on and add a little bit to the rocks. And you could do this with a palette knife. A palette knife would be another way to do this. So the sky still has some of the colours from the sunset, and it's being picked up in the sea and on the rocks. And I just play back and forward with this. And as you'll hear me say often, you know, there's no point at which you know this is done, you know, no point that I could say this is done other than the point at which I feel myself that it's done. So now just taking some more titanium white. And I'm just using my finger and I'm going to put the moon in there. Not looking to get a perfect circle. If I did, I would have used a template or something of that sort, but I'm also going to pick up some bits and pieces of colour from my palette, that kind of blue, but also bits of the kind of purple that I made, and just creating interest in the moon. I didn't want it to be one single flat colour, and I will do this back and forward at various points through the painting. And there's points here where the paint on the end of my finger is very dry, so it's almost dragging, and that to me creates a nice effect. It starts to build that halo effect round the moon. But I am taking some of the darker colours just to allow it to stand out a bit more in the sky. It's picking up bits of white there as well, but that's fine, because I will be creating more of a halo in just a little while around this. So at this point, still just doing that kind of blocking in. Now just going around the mermaid with the black, just starting to sharpen up some of those edges and thinking about where maybe some shadows would be, where the darker rock would be. And again, doing this in different ways, using the paintbrush, but also using the plastic card just to scrape. And the benefit of using the card, I'm sometimes using the very corner, it lets some of the colour that's underneath show through. So now taking the phthalo green, and I'm going to start to paint in her tail. Just a thin coat at this stage. And I'll just go back and forward over that until I've got it all in. I'm now taking some burnt sienna and some crimson red, and I'm going to block in her hair, first with the burnt sienna, and then I'm doing the crimson red on top, and again trying to get it a little bit textured, not flat, you know, so leaving the paint just slightly thicker in some areas. Then just taking that burnt sienna with some white, and I'm going to start to put a little bit of colour on her arms. Now, I'm not entirely certain that I've got her arms correct here, but I'm imagining that the one at the back will look longer because she's leaning back the way, and the other one is going in front of her tail, but I'm not sure that I've got the lengths right. But it's okay, you know. Again, artistic license. So a bit of colour there. Then I'm taking the black again and just starting to go around her in a bit more detail. Just getting rid of, it's not white underneath because we put that pale blue down to begin with, but just getting rid of those lighter bits where they are. Now taking the white on a dry brush and just getting the reflection of the moon. Not in a solid block, just imagining that the waves on the sea are moving and therefore it breaks up the light a little bit. And you'll see I go back and forward. There I'm just taking some black on my finger and just going a bit round the moon again. Now taking some white and just adding in some little clouds, just thinking about some little nighttime clouds going across the sky, just adding a bit of water to them there, just to spread it out a little bit, and I'll also put a little bit of white on that kind of horizon line, just to define that in a little bit more detail. And of course I'm drying it at most stages here. So I'm now taking the gold. And this is where I start to add a little bit more detail and interest, starting to take some of the flatness away from there, doing her hair, taking the other end of the paintbrush and just scratching some lines in it. Again, just getting texture and the notion of the different strands of hair. And I'm also going to put a little bit of the gold onto her skin. Just imagining a bit of the light on her skin. So just starting to build layers, starting to bring a bit more of the detail into the painting. And of course the gold gives it that nice kind of shimmer. Taking the edge of my plastic card again, and I'm now just going to introduce some of that gold into the sky. Just scraping it on, just little bits here and there. Trying to create almost a kind of magical looking sky. Now taking a small round brush and some of the phthalo blue. And I'm not going to paint in full scales, I'm just going to do little dabs. So all this is doing is to give the impression of the scales being there. Could of course sit and draw them all in, and if you're someone that likes a lot of detail rather than impression, then of course that's something you could do. Because that's the thing with this project, and you know, anything Nina does, we are giving you inspiration that you can draw on in whatever way you see fit. And then I do the exact same with the phthalo green. So again, I'm building up texture on here, giving that impression of scales with the two colours. So I'm now going to take some silver. And you can see how the painting is starting to build here, starting to get much more detail into it. And I'm taking the silver and going round the moon, first of all with my finger, then I take some on a brush that's got a little bit of water on it, and just putting a bit more of the halo effect around the moon, and putting a bit of the silver onto the moon as well, but still trying to retain some of that colour that's down underneath. Then adding a little bit to the water, and you see again I add some water to that just to spread it out and break it up a little bit. Then I take some and add it to the sky, again just on my card, in the same way that I did with the gold, just looking to get those colours in there. Not doing the northern lights or anything like that, but if you can imagine, you know, the effects that you get, just almost out of this world effects, well, just thinking in a similar way, trying to create a kind of fantasy sky here. Now just taking some of the silver and taking it along the edge of the rocks, because obviously the moon shining on it, you would start to see some of the outline of the rocks. And again, this just helps to give the rocks a little bit more definition. So yes, if this project interests you, then you feel free to interpret it in whatever way you want, whether it's in an artist book like I'm doing, or on an ATC, or in an art journal page. This is simply to give you an idea, but I'm very much looking forward to doing this full book. So I now want to add some stars to the sky, and I'm just using the back of my paintbrush, although I do swap that out in a second just for a crochet hook, and I'm just going to use the very thin end of that just to make some little stars. So just adding them right across the sky. Now I'm taking these Derwent Colour Soft pencils. I won't list all the colours, but this was a kind of light brown fawn, and I'm just trying to add a little bit more detail here, just getting a little bit of shading on the arms, and I just use that to add in some more colour to the hair. I'm leaving this in. This was a kind of green colour, although it's not a bright green by any means, but I'm just leaving this in because this is the way that I start to create the actual detail. So this was a purple, and again that just gave me a bit of kind of magical interest to the sky there, and a bit of the green, so it enhances, I think, some of the colours sitting underneath it. The main colour is sitting there and underneath, but this just starts to enhance it. And of course I can also use the black just to go around the tail and help define any detail. Just going around the moon with that there for no reason other than I kind of felt like doing that. Taking the white and going round the moon, just picking it up a little bit on some of the detail. Tiny touches in some ways, picking up some of the waves, and just some detail in the sky. For me, these are the points where, you know, the finishing details really start to bring a painting to life. Bit more colour here, using, I think it's a fawn colour. I'm not looking for a lot of detail on the hands. All I've done is to get the kind of general shape. Again, it's just the kind of impression of it rather than in any actual detail. This was an indigo. Don't see it too much on the film, but just adding those slight colours and details. I've taken a red pencil now and I'm starting to add in some of the detail on the hair, some of those kind of individual strands. So just to give the sense here that it's not one huge piece of hair. There's little strands there, some of them sticking out so that the sky is seen through them. And again, I think just with a kind of light brown doing that. And it's coming down, you see a bit down and over her arm there. And a bit of green adding onto the tail. So it just gives a little bit of light where the moon would be hitting her tail. Lightening up some of the rocks there just a little bit. You know, in the way that you see on rocks where the sea has hit it and it starts to show some of the kind of seaweed type things that stick to the rocks. So I'm looking now for a white pen. I want to just add a few more bits of detail. My Posca pen isn't working properly, so I end up just flooding it, but then using this other pen, just sticking this into the ink and pulling it through. Again, I just want to give one or two highlights on her hair just to pick up some of the detail there. Thinking too, she's maybe just come out of the water and you know there may still be some water that's catching the light and dripping off. And I'll also use this just again to catch some of the edge of the rock there. The moon perhaps hitting little bits of water and it just shining in the light. And just adding a little bit onto her tail again, where the moon would be shining, because her tail has scales and may indeed still be wet from just coming out of the sea. And that is just about it. And just looking at how this will stand as the week goes on. At this stage I could play with this for hours. I honestly could, just adding little bits of detail, little bits of colour here and there. But obviously for the purposes of this I need to call a halt at it at some point. But you know, I could go back to it in future if I felt so inclined. I enjoy each bit of the art process, but there is something about doing the finishing touches that's really enjoyable. So I've got it at this point and I'm looking and I'm thinking, yep, I can see how this is going to work. I can see how it's going to stand up in the way that I envisage. You know, by the time I get 4 different weeks worth of work in here, and then of course I will be doing the cover as well. But as I'm looking at it, I'm thinking, one more thing that I want to do here. But I'm just checking it over, looking at all the colours, loving the little bits of the gold and the silver, you know, loving it in her hair there. And I'm looking at her tail and I'm thinking, I think I need a little bit more on there. I love that sky. Doesn't matter whether it's realistic or not, this is fantasy. And just looking at that and thinking, yep, but the tail needs something more, just a little bit. So what I'm going to do now is I am going to take out my silver again, and I'm just going to put a little bit of silver onto it. Not much, but a little. So I take the silver. Now I don't want it too thick, so I put it on. Put it right over the tail. Going right round there. But then what I do is I put some water on my brush. I smooth it out first, but then I put a bit of water on my brush. And then I just brush it over that a bit, just to loosen the paint up a bit. And then what I'll do is I'll just take a piece of tissue just to lift it a little bit, because all I want is just that tiny, tiny shimmer. So just gently rubbing it there. And then she's done. So I do hope you've enjoyed this. I hope you like my mermaid on the rocks. And of course Nina will have a video this week, and I'll leave a link to her video below, and I'll leave a link to the Mixed Media Emporium below. So I hope you will join me for future videos, both in this series and any others that I put up. But as always, thanks so much for watching. Please stay safe, take care, and look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.